it seems like some people experience cacao as a heart opener. It seems like cacao helps flow, helps movement subtly. It is an element that we can use to take us to the edges and allow us to be more comfortable to sit in the discomfort. Things we should be watching out for is how much are the facilitators or the groups there telling you what is versus offering you their experience and empowering you to say yes or no or adapt it to your own specifications. As with everything, you are the most important thing in your universe. And as such, when we're doing any sort of practice, to allow ourselves the permission to change and to adjust our behavior where we are best serve our highest good, our highest wellness. Not giving away our power to other people, but allowing our edges to be pushed and to be expanded. Hello and welcome to another inspiring live inspirational community collaboration #LIC. Please share this video. That's the way we spread the love. Sharing and liking and commenting. And if you want to make comments on this video while it's going on, I do receive them through to the system while the guest is on. Let me introduce our guests for today. And this is actually the last session of the first season of this show. We've reached about 100 guests now. You can see all of them on markabadi.com/watch. Nick Meador, he is he's going to be sharing on cacao, on the ceremonial cacao and how it can change your life. Nick is a transformational coach, ceremonial cacao enthusiast, and mindful entrepreneur. His mission is to guide people to empowerment and liberation in a sustainable way. Nick has experienced and overcame chronic fatigue syndrome, is a phenomenally debilitating issue, in part with the help of ceremonial cacao. With his social entrepreneurial business, Soul Lift Cacao, based in San Francisco Bay Area, Nick sources artisanal cacao from family farms and collectives in Guatemala through ethical direct trade. Nick also offers facilitation training courses and in both group and private coaching services for people who want to level up their personal professional life with ceremonial cacao as an ally. You can find out more on soulliftcacao.com. So without further ado, we will go over to Nick. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark. It's great to be here.
Yes, great. Oh, I go by Markabadi. When you met me, I was just going by Mark, but I deleted the space.
Markabadi.
I'm now Markabadi. Well, welcome. So we one of the things we talked about is, cacao has been a fantastic service in my life, and we take cacao and turn it into chocolate, and that obviously is the most popular thing on the planet. Just let's start off with, what's the difference between cacao and chocolate?
Yeah, it's complicated because cacao is originally it's basically the original form of chocolate, but cacao comes in so many different forms that it can mean so many different things. And some people, even get fixated on the term raw cacao. In my journey, I found that seems like a mislabel in most cases, because even organic pure cacao powder, whether it's cacao nibs from a store or a ceremonial handmade cacao paste, is going to go through some kind of roast.
Right.
But at the very least, if you hear the term cacao, it means that it's closer to the original form than what we call chocolate, which tends to have things mixed in it like sugar and other additives. Unfortunately, sometimes chemicals and gross stuff. Right.
And then the difference between cacao and cocoa.
Well, cocoa is processed with alkali. That's the standard. So that was developed, I think, in the 1800s by the Dutch, to probably make it easier to transport to Europe, because real cacao with all the butter still in it melts very easily once it's ground. It's actually pretty difficult to transport even today through hot temperatures. So by removing most of the cacao butter, they were left with essentially powder, but cocoa is more processed than what we call cacao powder. cacao powder is still more processed than ceremonial cacao paste. It's like this whole spectrum of different levels of processing and treating.
So obviously, the less processing, the better for these situations.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, cool. So tell us what's actually going on with cacao. What is the magic in cacao that everyone's raves about?
This is something that is still unfolding in this part of the world. It's like a constant rediscovering or more information coming to light about why we even consider it a plant medicine. And, there's this fact that it's been used for at least 3,000 years in the parts of the world that we now call Central and South America to help people connect with the divine. But I've been traveling through Central America as an adult since 2016, trying to visit cacao farms, speak with experts, meet with collectives and things like that. And at least in the first couple of years, everywhere I went and asked, what is this? What's the story? What's ceremonial cacao or cacao ceremonies? I just got a lot of puzzled looks. And so then I started hearing cacao is still present in some Mayan ceremonies, but maybe it's just part of a bigger picture, which seems to be true, that as far as cacao has been present, I think there's been a mixing up of, as Westerners seek out this information and experiences the indigenous wisdom and ancient practices, a lot of people have also experienced ayahuasca and other stronger plant medicines.
Right.
And especially in those cases, there tends to be a lineage where someone is serving a plant or a substance and designing a whole experience around that as an agent for, in some cases, a hallucinogen or psychedelic experience.
Right.
Whereas with cacao, that's not the case. Cacao's not, it can't really be considered a drug in any sense of the word. We stay in touch with our ordinary sense of reality. Don't experience visions. I usually, if people ask me if they're going to have visions, I tell them, unless you were already having visions, you're probably not going to have them.
Right.
So cacao is much more subtle. It's a gentle, very, very gentle plant medicine. But at the same time, there is something of an intelligence or spirit in it. It's just subjective how different people experience it.
I mean, even though it has been dissolved and mixed and bastardized around the world, it is one of the most popular things on the planet, chocolate.
Oh, yeah.
So do you think that there is a sort of an infusion going on in the consciousness of the planet, even though it's mixed with sugar and milk and all that stuff?
I wonder about that because I had a deep relationship with chocolate long ago. It's interesting to think about that. I mean, unfortunately, it was the processed stuff and had a lot of sugar in it. And so people have this also misunderstanding that they think chocolate or cacao has a lot of caffeine. But if and when there's caffeine in cacao or chocolate, it's a very small amount, like almost negligible compared to tea or coffee. Theobromine is the main active compound that is a stimulant, but it really increases the heart rate, so it's more of a cardiac stimulant than caffeine, for example, which can act on the whole nervous system.
Right.
But yeah, I wonder about that because we also consider chocolate an aphrodisiac generally, and even in the movie Chocolat about the French shop.
Great movie.
There's a scene in that where they actually kind of transport to Central America and show a little glimpse of the historical use of cacao prepared as a drink. I mean, it was really known more as food, even if it was a liquid preparation. But that leads into the question of what is the point of working with cacao. Do people need to work with it in a certain way to experience the benefits? And I do have a belief that if it's the real stuff prepared with love, attention from small family farms, then people are going to experience certain kinds of benefit, potentially life-changing benefits, even if they don't do certain, go through a certain sequence of activities or something with it.
Right. So how important is the ritual process? I mean, as somebody who's, I've been meditating for 20 years and I've been dissolving all the attachments to out here. And so it's only been new for me to reconnect with ritual practice. I come from a Jewish background, so I kind of rebelled against ritual practice. But more recently, I've witnessed the power of ritual how much and how important is ritual in this process of working with cacao?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. And yeah, I grew up Catholic and rebelled against what seemed to me like imitative rituals. So
right,
as an adult,
imitative rituals. That's a good line. I like that.
I think that comes from Carl Jung, actually, that term.
Oh, really? Okay, go on.
Yeah. So as an adult, over these last 10 years, I've been on a journey of exploring depth psychology and different ways of having a transformational journey. Yeah, through both embodied practices and more mental, like community practices, belief work, and all of that. So I do feel really strongly about the importance of ritual. And for me, I mean, that's the thing about the traditional context of, for example, Mayan. I work mostly in connection with Mayan people for the cacao. And so it seems more and more, as I learn more about their culture and the way that they work with cacao, it seems like it's actually all about ritual to them. Not as much about tailoring a sequence of experiences, like in the way that in the Western transformational sense of, reprogramming people or that kind of thing. But yeah, it seems like the ritual, the pattern of going through things in a certain order, and the songs and the decorations is actually of primary importance in the traditional way of working with cacao. For me, if I'm training people, for example, I do bring a lot of attention to the container, the intention circle. Those things are of big importance to me. And then having at least some kind of ritual, even if it's only 15 minutes long with the cacao, because then there's a lot of space for creativity and improvisation, either staying in a more held meditative space or expanding into movement or some intimacy practices, things like that.
All right, well, we're talking about ritual, and it's sort of akin to ceremony and ceremonial. And we had this first thing about, you saying there's a difference between cacao ceremony and ceremonial cacao. Can you take us and what's the controversy and what's the issue?
Sure. Yeah, they both are a little bit controversial, actually, because the term ceremonial cacao, people mean different things when they use that term. To me, it means that the cacao was toasted over a wood fire, actually. But that's not. There are definitely companies in the United States, at least, that are using the term ceremonial cacao, but they're just buying beans from a place, another country, and then doing the bean to bar model, where they roast them in a propane oven, probably grind them themselves. And so this, that's sort of the fair trade bean to bar model. It's better than the highly processed chocolate that's available, but to me, it's not exactly ceremonial cacao. And I've been on this mission to raise awareness about the more traditional way of preparing cacao, because to me, it changes the flavor and the energy, which can then change the whole experience of working with cacao, even if someone's just doing that in the privacy of their own home. Right. So that's ceremonial cacao, and then the term cacao ceremony is kind of vague. That's part of the issue, and there's not enough distinguishing between, if someone uses that term in the US or Europe or Australia, they're talking about what would be, we could just call it a modern cacao ceremony or a modern ceremony. And any more specific information they can bring about what practices they're actually going to bring into the experience, what exactly their training has been, what maybe lineage, and sometimes it's a mix of modern practices and more traditional or shamanic practices. But the more specific they can be about what they're drawing in, the better for the ethics of it. Because the term cacao ceremony, as far as I can tell so far, that term doesn't actually come from the indigenous cultures. It seems like, they talk about ceremonies, and there'll be a lot of different pieces that come into it. But now it seems like they're trying to readopt or maybe adopt this term cacao ceremony because Western people are so interested in it as a concept.
Right. I mean, it almost feels like we are doing the thing we did to science on it, where we split it into constituent parts and kind of and say, right, now we've got chemistry, okay, well, now we've got physics, okay, right, now we've got biology. And is that the case with cacao? Like cacao ceremony by itself, does it need, what else does it need to make it a holistic, most effective medicine?
That's a good question, and I think it's actually an ongoing conversation. And I, in some ways, have felt like I'm on the sidelines in the conversation because I've never really felt totally comfortable in the New Age mode, that the way I see it. And I've been involved in so many spiritual groups that are not specific enough about containers. And so to me, that's not just the physical container, but the symbolic agreements and guidelines that come into an experience. So this is part of my mission as I train, I'm training people to work with cacao and also just with facilitation in general, facilitating transformational experiences. And we start with talking about our own beliefs and our own communication patterns. In other words, how to not become the type of narcissistic spiritual leaders who end up abusing people, either physically or just not realizing that they're dumping their beliefs onto people that come into the experiences. And I think these things come before preparing a pot of cacao and serving it to people, really. So in some ways, I'm like trying to sneak in this really important information because people are so gravitated towards ceremonial cacao. But at the same time, they go together, in my opinion, because cacao as a plant medicine has definitely tuned me more into the gears, that are working in the background of my own awareness and my own behavior, in a gentle way. So cacao has definitely informed all of this work that I'm now doing on how to create safer containers.
Right. Now we talk about containers and them having a sort of a specific structure. There's also quite a lot of talk about sort of inspirational, improv, organic, unfolding. What in your experience is the best balance to be able to honor or to be able to create a structure to allow the unknown unfolding to occur? Like how much container is a good amount of container to allow for not a restriction by the container, but an expansion?
It's a great question. Yeah, I have been in different kinds of plant medicine ceremonies where it felt like we focused on container stuff for an hour or more. That's more like ayahuasca, for example. Right. And in that case, if it's a stronger plant medicine, I think there's even more importance of spending a lot of time on the container. But even in a cacao experience, I usually would allow 3 to 4 hours for a cacao, for what I would call a cacao ceremony, because the first half hour, at least, we're going over the practical things, even where's the bathroom and where to find water. Right. And then going over whether or not this is a confidential space. That's an important one to me too. Even if it's not going, this is something I want to start doing, is if I'm not going to have a confidentiality agreement to let people know that, because then that might influence what they choose to share personally, how they want to show up for the experience. So consent is another big one that I like to call in, that everyone has the choice with what they participate in and what they share. Everyone knows essentially what's right for them. And then I usually, with a cacao journey, will make a closed container where people are asked to arrive by a certain time. That is something that I've struggled a lot with in dance events, ecstatic dance, the way people can come and go. For a lot of people, it doesn't seem to matter, but for me, I can definitely get deeper into a journey, movement journey, like a non-verbal embodied journey, if I know that everyone has arrived at the beginning and was able to settle in and hopefully have that discussion of what are the actual agreements.
So, can you overdose on cacao?
I've only ever heard of one person vomiting, and it seemed like they were trying to do that, so it could have just been psychosomatic. But I think they had, the maximum amount that I would ever serve anyone is about 1.5 ounces of pure ceremonial cacao. That's approximately 43 grams. So in an 8-hour period, I would say. Beyond that, someone could get a headache or could feel nauseous. It depends on if they've had something to eat beforehand and how much water they drink during and after the experience. But recently, someone asked me the question of, could cacao be life-threatening in any case? Because I have heard at least a couple stories of people who were mixing it with drugs, or people who already had a heart condition. That's another thing to think about. That's really the only case I've heard of someone who died who was in a cacao dance experience. It seems like it was a combination of also the heart condition, and not something to laugh about, but some combination of the heart condition and other dangerous.
Because it increases your heartbeat, your heart rate, right?
Yeah. So at the same time, it lowers blood pressure. So for people who don't have a heart condition, it actually has a lot. It's the antioxidants in cacao that have been shown to lower blood pressure, lower the chance of blood, was it atherosclerosis, I think is the term, like the clogging of the arteries. And the same with the antioxidants, it also lowers the risk of stroke, increases memory function. Yeah, it's just, that's the real superfood component of cacao.
It's interesting because some of the effects from Beverly Rubik's research on electromagnetics is that it clumps blood. The EM fields clump blood. And so if cacao is an anti-clumper, it's interesting. Like, are you drinking cacao now from your cup?
No, it's just water.
A friend of mine just has a big cup like you've got of cacao every morning. So, I mean, they're having cacao every morning instead of like coffee or tea. I mean, do you think that's a good practice?
I usually recommend that people just follow their body and follow their intuition. Like, there's not any right amount. I mean, there's not any right frequency with it. If people ask me and they have never worked with cacao before, I just recommend that they take at least 2 to 3 days off per week. But it's not, I don't have concerns about organs or something like that. It's just more energetically. If I have cacao every day, then I start to feel a little frazzled kind of in my energy. And then I just take a couple of days off. Or I actually currently haven't had cacao in maybe this whole week, basically, like 4 days. And that's just how it goes, especially during the lockdown, because cacao to me feels like it wants movement, creatively and also physically. So during the lockdown, I have had less cacao, which is strange because people have been buying a lot of cacao from me during the quarantine. It seems like a lot of people are seeking the support of cacao during this weird time.
And so then what are you saying is the best use of cacao, the best type of things to support cacao? Is it movement? I mean, do you consume cacao and then dance?
It's different for everyone, different times. It's like, it depends on where we're at, what kind of things are up for us. So, but movement could also be slow, like Tai Chi, Qigong, it could be yoga, it could be a walk in nature. But any of those kind of things, have been very rewarding for me with cacao. Yeah, for me, it's yoga and taking walks. Those are my favorite.
Right. Because it seems like the cacao, increasing the heartbeat and decreasing clogging of the blood it's like saying, okay, now we're moving. Yeah.
What? Yeah. Another thing that comes to mind is the idea of therapeutic discomfort or edge work. Because for different, someone who is very active, it might be edgier for them to sit still.
Right.
And to just feel the emotions that come up and feel the subtle body sensations. But maybe someone who just has a more lethargic state or nature, it could be more medicinal for them to get up and dance.
I like that. A lot of these talks have revealed this kind of go to where the discomfort is. Mm-hmm. And are you a big sort of fan of that, especially using cacao to sort of help you process the edges?
Definitely. Yeah, I just want to watch out because some people start to equate discomfort or even pain with evolution. That's the only thing to look out for. I think that we don't always have to be uncomfortable in order to be growing and evolving. But I got on this journey because of chronic fatigue syndrome. So I was experiencing muscle aches and exhaustion and brain fog on and off for about 5 years. But it was that started in 2011, and that's what really launched my spiritual quest to figure out who I am and what changes I needed to make in my life to feel better and like I was tuned into my purpose.
And so then explain a little bit more about that. Talk a little bit more about the symptoms you had and what other things you tried. And then, I mean, you came to cacao.
Yeah. So that was 2011 when that started. I tried different things. Some things seemed to help a little bit, but it was actually the framework that ended up helping was from the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, and they actually had a very holistic approach to it, because some doctors thought Epstein-Barr virus caused it, and the Mayo Clinic was like, 80 to 90% of people get Epstein-Barr, and most people don't even get a cold. It's interesting now that we're dealing with this coronavirus situation and different people experience it in different ways. That's how viruses can be, really. So Epstein-Barr may have been part of the straw on the camel's back when I got really sick in 2011, but the camel was or whatever, however you say it, living in an unsustainable way for like 30 years before that, not eating well and not having the stress relief practices that I had started meditating, but I was just off track. So I'm a spiritual person, and I believe that that things can, information can come through our body. Definitely, that's definitely core to my spiritual beliefs. And so I went places. I went to Boulder and Portland 2012. I was in Boulder for 2012 for the, what people thought would be like a big turning point in our culture. Maybe it was, I don't know. But for me, it was a big turning point, because that was when I started to really I put myself first. It was like, for the first time ever, I was suddenly on my own journey and trying to find a way to trying to find what would make life worthwhile, regardless of the challenges and the setbacks that would come. So I didn't find cacao until 2015. I was at a small Burning Man event in Michigan, where I'm from, and someone led a cacao ceremony at the camp I was staying with, and it was this real deal, Guatemalan ceremonial cacao, artisanal, made by hand. And instantly I knew it was going to be part of my life. I didn't really understand the effect that it was having, because it's so subtle, until much later, even like 2 years later. Looking back, I was like, wow, that was actually a big turning point in my life, when suddenly it was like a light switch went off, where I started to take more responsibility for my own health and well-being. Instead of, up to that point, I was wanting someone to cure me, or fix me, or something to cure me. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting that you said, put yourself first. What were you doing before that?
Well, I'm still on a long journey out of codependency. I'll put it that way. But back then, in my 20s, I was so deep in just trying to fit into what I thought other people's expectations were for me, whether that was a partner or the community that I grew up in. I'm from Detroit, so it is a relatively conservative place. It's, the factory mindset is still very alive there. So early in my life, I was just trying to go along with that and fit into, the expectations that seemed to be there for me, not realizing that it was making me so miserable that I really didn't want to, just didn't see a way to continue. And kept trying to make it work, ended up with a drug problem too, because I was just trying to get by, and definitely dealt with depression too through my 20s. So it was like the depression, the addiction, the chronic fatigue, and then it was like all these alarm bells just kept going off more and more, until I finally developed the courage to jump out of the box.
Nice, well done. So I'm curious about chronic fatigue, because I know quite a few people with this. What's your view on the origin of it, in terms of communication, in terms of throat chakra, thyroid gland, and speaking one's truth? Because that seemed to echo the message that you were saying about how you felt prior.
Yeah. And chronic fatigue syndrome, to me, it's not a disease in itself. It's a collection of symptoms. So it doesn't point to any actual medical explanation, which turned out to be the case for me. I did all these tests across the board, everything you can imagine, and there was just no concrete medical explanation for what I was experiencing. And so a lot of doctors, maybe today, even still don't believe that it's a real thing. and it's similar with fibromyalgia. The symptomology is also related with people who experience chronic Lyme's disease, but then they do have at least some biological explanation because of the Lyme's.
Yeah.
Anyway, with chronic fatigue, I got a little bit off track with the question.
Well, I suppose the question was, because you referenced that prior to your healing and working with cacao, there was this level of kind of self-repression where you then said at the end of that, you went, I'm going to put myself first, which indicates you weren't putting yourself first, and thus you were like holding yourself back for other people. And this is something that I've seen, and I'm just wondering if that now is in your consciousness as a symptom of, or a lead up to a chronic fatigue type of esque symptoms. That there was like a self-repression.
Yeah, I mean, codependency is coming back to mind actually, because it can be this wavering back and forth between like retreating into, I don't know if this is for everyone who identifies as codependent,
right.
But for me it was like either retreating into my own reality and hiding there, or kind of exploding like reactively, instead of a middle ground. To me would be more like assertive communication, where I can stand in my truth and own my experience without taking away from someone else's or blaming them for what I'm experiencing. Yeah. So systems that have helped with that are nonviolent communication and one called T Group, which is, I think it started in Boulder, but it's pretty big here in the Bay Area.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So with, nonviolent communication, and these are forms of communication, and going back to the throat chakra, how important have you finding that cacao interacts with this area of the vocals? Like, how much, when people take cacao, do they feel like the need to communicate, to sing, to vocalize? Have you noticed that there is this shift in people to communicate?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't really work with songs very much, and I guess at some point I judged it because maybe because of my upbringing with the songs that seemed kind of superficial in Catholicism, but in terms of ceremonial work or plant medicine work, I've never really connected with songs, and now it seems to me because I guess another way to put it is I have connected with catharsis work. There are practices. It's interesting. Some of these active meditations from the world of Osho, who I've never really known much about his philosophy, and lately there's more coming to light about his organization and the horrible things that went on there. But these active meditations have helped me a lot. The dynamic meditation is a catharsis practice. So with the right container, that was very healing for me. It involves a period of screaming and yelling and just waving body around. So that, now I'm like coughing.
Yeah.
That relates to the throat chakra. Yeah, I know. Yeah, coughing it up. And then on the other hand, I would say the actual communication and belief repatterning work is the other piece of that. Both of these are amplified or just made more complete with the help of cacao, I would say. So in a ceremony or in a cacao journey, I'll intentionally try to create at least a phase of each of that. After the cacao ritual, I would usually take people into an embodiment practice, a breath work. There's a chakra breathwork practice that I lead, also from the Osho world, where people are sending the breath for a few minutes, imagining sending the breath through each chakra, and I'll guide them to, reflect on the associations with all of those chakras as well. Yeah. But in a journey for them to have some embodiment experience, and then usually the later part, I'll take people into the more interactive communication experience, because then it's like coming back to ground.
Right.
Integrate. Right. To me, the integration is just as important as whatever people experience. Being able to put it into words, that's to me how it can not just be a peak experience, but something that really lasts.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Osho a few times. I'm wearing Osho colours today, and and my surround is that burgundy, that Osho colour. I've been to the cash ram in India. It's a nice place, but as I said, a bit of a cash ram. So, with regards to sort of follow up, what happens post ceremony? Do you keep in touch with the people, and do they come back to you, and do you find that they want to then communicate? Because it seems like that cacao is a flower, It dissolves blockages, almost like a drain blockage removal. Would you concur with that?
Yeah, in a gentle way. So it's like opening the faucet a little bit instead of some substances that just turn on the fire hose in your face. Right. But this is an interesting question too, because I'm also trying to figure out how to create an ethical practice and to not, because in the world of transformational work and self-development, unfortunately, because there aren't licenses for cacao ceremonialists or for tantra practitioners. So people, my story or my belief is that people have resorted to sometimes unclear business models in order to maximize their income and to build their following. And unfortunately, I've experienced, this is what informs my work, is the experiences I've had with groups that were doing things to me that seemed like mind control, at the very least.
So can you give some examples of that?
Well,
you don't have to name anyone, but just give me some examples of what you would consider unethical.
Similar to things I've heard about Scientology, like filming people during really deep processing work where they're crying in front of strangers and telling people some of the most horrible things they've ever been through, and that's happening on camera, and there's not clarity about what that footage is going to be used for afterwards. And in Scientology, they actually end up bribing people with that footage. The group that I was in, I never heard about anything that extreme happening, but they were also, well, this is one group I'm thinking of. I've had a variety of experiences of different shades, but this one group was also making up terms for different things that people experience with some parallels to Jungian psychology, but they would kind of just tweak the terms a little bit in a way that the pieces never really quite added up to me, but people would get hooked on this terminology, and that ultimately led them to get hooked on the group and to continue paying for more courses and programs. And that's when things get cult-like to me, is when people can't make sense out of the world and their experience in reality outside of one system's dogma. Right.
And it seems like that's antecedent to cacao itself, which is a flower, a mover.
Yeah, and the more I'm learning about Mayan cosmovision or Mayan spirituality, it seems like this non-dogmatic approach is important there as well. Yeah.
So
that could be informed by. It could be something about the cacao spirit, pushing that forward too.
Yeah, so would you say that cacao is an excellent medicine for people who feel stuck at this time, who are trying to transition?
Definitely, because it's because it's so gentle that I think it's a really amazing tool for this time. And just like how it took me a couple of years to realize the impact it had, I've also been getting feedback recently from people who were in my workshops back in 2017, 2018, and they're coming to me, and some people have told me, like, wow, that had such a huge impact on my life, and I would have loved to hear that sooner, but I guess that's just the way it goes with cacao.
Right, exactly. So it's this sort of slow burn. But so what would you say is the power of the subtle versus the power of like force?
It's that it is easier to integrate. It's that we stay in our ordinary consciousness. So we don't go into a dream world, and usually we don't go into past painful experiences. So there's less chance for re-traumatization. I do work with some trauma release practices, but mostly like shaking, quivering type of practices. Some breathwork practices can have a trauma release component, but because with cacao, it's mostly subtle body sensations. People describe it as a heart opener. That can be just a warm, fuzzy feeling that comes over us, and then it's just subjective beyond that. Like my personal experience has been that I feel like I get insights by working with cacao. I just get more clarity about the things that I'm working through and maybe challenges that I'm facing. That's my personal belief, and it seems like a lot of other people experience that, but I try to just keep that in mind that's not a scientific fact necessarily.
Right. What's the most magical thing you've seen or experienced with cacao? Like what would you say is I mean, I get that those subtle elements, but what's the most powerful or the most transformational element of this medicine?
Well, I first had real ceremonial cacao in June 2015, and at that point I had been struggling with chronic fatigue syndrome for four years. So then by mid-2016, I was starting to experience lasting recovery from chronic fatigue. So within a year and a half, I mean, I was doing a lot of white tantra work, the trauma release work, and belief system repatterning. But cacao, when I didn't think I could go any further, when I was running into those beliefs, limiting beliefs, right. Cacao is what kept me going. Right.
So it allowed you to pass through the limiting beliefs?
It's just like a one step at a time kind of. That's actually that. Looking back to that informed my own spiritual beliefs about how to lead from some impulse in my core or my gut feeling that like the cacao combined with the walking, both physically walking, but as a metaphor too for how to proceed through life one step at a time and just continually adjusting for what people call the higher path compared to what I used to do, which was like get an abstract goal way down the line, and even if I got there, oftentimes I would still be miserable or feel like it wasn't actually right for me. And then the other amazing things are hearing the testimonials. Even when I'm from Michigan, and when I started working with cacao, I created a weekly cacao meditation group. And so very simple experience, a cacao ritual and then an hour-long meditation together. And after a couple of months, some of those people seem to be making really big changes in their life. So that's the interesting thing about cacao facilitation. We can create really intricate, complex experiences for people, but even just creating a safe container and serving people cacao and focusing on the breath for some time is enough for people to have a life, a change in their life.
Amazing. I think. And so we've already outlined that there's importance about how the cacao is prepared.
Yeah.
And do you sell that cacao then?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, Soul Lift Cacao is my social enterprise business. So it's a business with a mission to create positive change, both with the earth, definitely. Working only with I don't have the organic certification yet, but they're farms that don't use any pesticides right. and consider themselves organic. And then, so the beans are created on those small family farms. Then the beans go to Lake Atitlan, known as the Cosmic Vortex. It's just a really special place that has become famous for ceremonial cacao. There's I think Canadian man named Keith who has been there for decades. He's done actually probably the most to spread awareness about ceremonial cacao to people from other parts of the world. So now I was at first just bringing back cacao in my suitcase on my travels, but 2.5 years ago I founded this business in California, and I narrowed my mission down to only work with groups who are at Lake Atitlan. So now as of today I have 5 varieties of pure cacao paste that I source, and then I'm starting to make drinking chocolate mixes for people who don't want to do the chopping themselves, and some superfood snacks.
Great. What have you found that cacao mixes best with? Like, in aromatherapy, for example, we have synergies where, certain oils blend well with others and become greater than the sum of their parts.
Yeah.
Does cacao have such things?
Yes, the traditional preparation would be with vanilla or some kind of unrefined sugar, some pepper. I use cayenne, but that's probably not what would have been available in Guatemala. Maybe some other kind of pepper, and then some vanilla. So the cacao, a bit of sugar, pepper, and like chili pepper, maybe. And vanilla.
Right.
Yeah, so in modern times, combining maca with cacao has become very popular. And maca is more from South America. I mean, cacao grows in South America too. That actually it seems like genetically that's the birthplace of cacao, interestingly, in the Amazon rainforest. Yeah, but I don't usually mix in supplements or strong herbs if I'm hosting a Cacao Journey, because people react differently to those.
Right.
It's hit or miss.
Yeah, you've got to keep it safer for the majority. I was just wondering, like, what about things like mushrooms, reishi, lion's mane, those sort of things? Have you found that helps, or is antecedent to the cacao effects?
That's another popular one. Definitely, I've heard of reishi mixed with it. I've not personally worked with that as much. Occasionally, I'll mix in maca. It just depends on if my energy's really low.
Right.
I need a kick. But that's, the American marketplace at least is very well. There's people respond to if there are different mixes of different products that have different ingredients, and to me sometimes it can just seem kind of arbitrary. Whereas maybe I'm a purist, but I like to chop the block myself and go through that. That's a ritual in itself, really, to me, is the chopping the block of cacao paste and mixing in whatever my body is calling for that day. Right.
Sort of a live alchemy.
Yeah.
I recently just decapitated some durians, which was fun. Live durians, and that was a lot of fun. So brilliant. So people can get the cacao from you. Are you now doing online kind of ceremonies where you send out little packets of the cacao to people who want to join the online thing, and then they mix it and you give them instructions, and then everyone meets on Zoom with their little cacao bowl?
Yes. Short answer is yes. Yeah. I just recently started to offer single serving packets of ritual drinking chocolate. So it's a 70% dark mix with the cacao, coconut sugar, and cayenne pepper. People can get those in 5 packs on the website if they want to go that route. And Soul Lift Cacao currently has a sharing circle every Thursday. So that's what we started calling it. It's essentially a little cacao ritual at the beginning, and then everyone gets a long form share, and it evolves into kind of a discussion about whatever is the big theme on people's minds.
So that's today?
Yeah. Right. And right now those are being led by the graduates of my 10-week training course that happened this spring. So I get a little break. I'm actually busy creating more courses, creating a self-guided version of the 10-week course, and so I've been busy in the background. It's really great to have other people step in and lead some of the more ceremonial experiences.
Tell us about the courses.
Well, it's called the Cacao Powered Facilitator. It's, like I said, it starts with belief systems and communication patterns, also confidence and congruence, like how to transmit through our body language.
Right.
But to do that in an ethical way, because as I was saying, in some spiritual settings or self-development groups, congruence can, just like a magician, it's like that can be used to influence people. So to do that mindfully, and then it goes into everything about cacao, how to vision and plan and spread the word for a cacao experience, preparing either for in-person or online. So I created a very in-depth guide for how to host a cacao experience in Zoom, even potentially using the breakout rooms feature and putting people into small groups, for example.
Great. Well, that sounds like a lot of fun.
It's a deep journey, because then I give people guides on how to lead embodied practices, how to lead communication, intimacy practices, including actual walkthroughs for how to do that. Things to look for during, if somebody is experiencing an emotional outpouring, the best ways to approach that and encourage their healing and release. All these little nuances. So it's been an amazing time for me after 10 years of studying all different kinds of traditions and practices to really synthesize this finally. And the first 10-week course started 3 days after quarantine began. It's so strange, the timing of that, because I had planned it back in January, and then March 16th or whatever it was, we started.
So I just want to quickly go back to, this notion of ethics and ethical behavior, and how it interacts with creating a container, because when you create a container, you as the facilitator are suggesting structure, almost edging on beliefs structure. So how do we create structure without incorporating any dogma into it? because they seem to be going in the same direction. Like structure seems to be going in the same direction as beliefs. Like we're building this structure because we have this belief. So how do we create ethical structure without projecting our own belief system onto people?
Yeah, it's an important question. And to me, dogma points to spiritual, metaphysical beliefs. That's the I mean, it can be also beliefs. This is the thing. I split spirituality into metaphysics and then the more practical side of things, how we decide to live our lives, how we navigate our day-to-day life, which religion actually traditionally would cover all of those things, the metaphysical beliefs, and then what foods to eat and what clothes to wear and who to have sex with, all that kind of stuff. So in modern times, this it's like I'm a human, I have beliefs, but the more transparent I can be, even in my phrasing. So instead of saying cacao is a heart opener, I could say that a lot of people report or a lot of people experience cacao as a heart opener or report sensation of heart opening effects. Or I could say something seems to me to be, or I have a story that ... So that's where the communication really has a huge impact, being just more transparent about what are my perceptions, what is based on my own direct experiences, and then how can to me, it's like the structure of the space and the guidelines, if the intention is to lead people through an experience that I have a reason also, I know my why, like why I'm leading them through those experiences, instead of it just being a random mix of new agey things, hodgepodge, to actually have a why and be able to explain to the people in the room why I'm leading them through that, because they're trusting me, oftentimes someone that they don't know, and unfortunately, it's like in the U.S. at least, I think in most Western cultures, we've been conditioned to follow authority figures without questioning.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So as a facilitator, I also want to encourage people to say no, or to ask questions, or to take a break, or to modify a practice, as really good yoga teachers will say, adjust if you need to, or modify if it's not in your practice. Unfortunately, in the world of yoga, though, it's not in my experience, it's not the standard. And even, on the question of consent with touch and adjustments, like in cacao work, physical adjustments might not be as common, but in the work in body practices I lead, they can potentially help. But I want to get consent before we go in about if people consent to physical adjustments. Yeah.
Wow, lovely. Well, thanks for holding that integral space of ethical presence and integrity. Integrity is so key in this work, and as you rightly said, there are a lot of spiritual people who don't do that out of fear and what have you. So wonderful. Well, thanks so much for sharing your wonderful gifts and your presence and yourself. And people can find out more at your website. Obviously, that's the place.
It's an honor.
Soul Lift Cacao.
Yep, soulliftcacao.com.
Wonderful.
And it's on Facebook and Instagram too. So thanks so much for having me. It's been great.
Perfect. Thanks, Nick. I look forward to seeing some ceremony and sitting with you again in presence, in person. I'll just sum up the show. Hang there. I'll come back to you. Thank you so much. Wow. So cacao ceremonies. It seems that cacao is a heart opener. Or it seems like some people experience cacao as a heart opener. It seems like cacao helps flow, helps movement subtly. It is an element that we can use to expand our own empowerment, to take us to the edges and allow us to be more comfortable to sit in the discomfort. Things we should be watching out for is, in any sort of ceremony, in any sort of presence, how much are the facilitators or the groups there telling you what is versus offering you their experience and empowering you to say yes or no, or adapt it to your own specifications. As with everything, you are the most important thing in your universe. You are the leader of your universe, the king, the queen, the god of your universe. Without you, your universe would not exist. And as such, when we're doing any sort of practice, medicinal presence, to allow ourselves the permission to change and to adjust and to edit our behavior where we are best serve our highest good, our highest wellness, not giving away our power to other people, but allowing our edges to be pushed and to be expanded. Something that Nick said earlier, imitating ritual is not the way, but being present with our ritual practice, whatever that is, meditation, cacao ceremony, ayahuasca, any of those other things. But cacao is something that's accessible right now, presently, and is subtly empowering. That's the beauty of cacao. And we know there's a magic to it. That's why chocolate goes through the world. It's not just the sugar addiction that people are on with chocolate. And importantly, how the cacao is formed, how it's made, is an important aspect. Why? Because like most things, like the pharmaceutical industry that takes the active ingredient from a plant and melts it off and pulls it out and then throws away all the other stuff, they are removing the environment, the nature, the mathematics, and the things that make us. They're removing from the equation. And in the same way, cacao has all of these things. Sure, it has its active ingredients, but it also has the environment around it, which helps create a scenario for us to melt inwards into. And it also seems that cacao is an expressional tool. It helps us to articulate and to move this thyroid chakra area. And the thyroid gland is your power center. That's where your inspiration comes from. That's where your force, you're like, all right, I'm enthused to do this. And what's the problem nowadays is people are not enthused by anything. And it's not about just firing in either angry or apathetic. It's about having this flow, this be like water, as Bruce Lee would say, be like water. Yeah, and you can sit in your therapeutic discomfort with things. And it doesn't have to be extreme. For magic to happen, we don't need to, blast off with 5-MeO DMT, We don't need to blast off with 10 years in a cave. We can do it subtly each moment. And having these wonderful facilitators like Nick, who have at their core an integrity and a desire to have integrity, that is a great reflection to us. It's not about fear-based, how many people can I get in my cacao ceremony, plug them in. It is about what is our service. And what is your service? Who to first? As Nick said, when it really shifted for him, he put himself first. Are you putting yourself first? That's where the magic happens. Yeah? Cool. All right. Thank you so much. Such a pleasure. Thank you to my guest, Nick Meador. Please find out more on his site, soulliftcacao.com. I have a book Evolve. Still don't have a copy on my desk. Anyway, bookevolve.com. Please share these videos. This is, I think, the end of season 1. All the videos you can find at markabadi.com/watch. Thank you so much for being here and all your comments. Much love.